Hello and welcome to the Joe's Art History Podcast, a podcast which celebrates all things art historical every single day. It's episode 31 and this week I sit down with the contemporary artist Jeff Musser to discuss three incredible works by the original art world bad boy, Caravaggio. Born in Milan in 1571 to humble beginnings, Caravaggio went on to rock the art world with his incredible handling of light, perception, and the people within his depictions. He's one of those artists whose works look so real, you can almost feel the pain and ecstasy in the people that he depicts within his paintings. Jeff talks to us about three of the lesser discussed works by Caravaggio, which hold a significant importance to him. These are the Crucifixion of St. Peter, the Conversion of St. Paul, and the Madonna of the Pilgrims. Jeff's passion and love for Caravaggio is immediately evident, and my mind is still completely blown away by how brilliant this chat was. I would seriously recommend that you look up the works that we talk about, as no matter how much Jeff and I, and we do try, and describe how amazing these works are, it's just not as good as getting a sense and looking at them for yourself. So sit back, relax, and enjoy as Jeff and I discuss Caravaggio. This episode is really something special. And I just love it. So I think really my first question to sort of get the ball rolling is, can you remember the first time you came across a Caravaggio?
Oh, absolutely. It's a crisp memory, like it happened yesterday, even though it was 20 plus years ago. I think, like most people, when you find an artist that really grabs you, it's in a art history class. And that's what it was for me. And it was a history of Western Art 101, one of those introductory classes. And this will date me, but it was in a large cavernous room in a college where there's hundreds of seats, auditorium style. Then there's the professor down at the bottom who goes over the lessons, and it was slide presentations. So the room goes dark. There's the hum of the slide projector, and then there's the artist or movement being discussed. And I enjoyed it, but after a certain point, post-Renaissance, in my opinion, a lot of the work just sort of blended together. There are cherubs, there's flowing robes, everyone is good looking, everything is so crisp. Every time Jesus is depicted, he's got amazing abs. And it all just sort of, and it just sort of made me sleepy. Even though I was retaining things, I found myself sort of nodding off. And the moment that I learned about Caravaggio was the day that we were going to discuss the Baroque. So the teacher says, actually, she had this ritual that sort of let you know that things were wrapping up. She'd sort of gather all her papers and notes, and then she'd get them all situated, and then she'd start tapping them on the desk to line them all up so she could put them in her book bag. And that was sort of the wake-up call for all the people that were sleeping in the class. Okay, wake up, the class is almost over. So she did that, her usual ritual, and she ended with the slide of the Crucifixion of St. Peter. And she said, okay, on Thursday, we're going to begin with this guy. And then boom, the slide comes up. And she said, essentially, this man dropped an atomic bomb on the world of 17th century Rome. And I remember looking up and going, oh, what is this? And I think I heard a couple other audible, like, whoa, like behind me. And it was like a switch was flipped on inside me. And I remember that class, I was ready. It's like, okay, I'm not sleeping through any of this. And I guess that's when I became a Caravaggioist or Caravaggiist. And I just started to absorb as much as I could. And then she went into the life of this man. I was like, Jesus. I was like, he was the archetype for the art bad boy that sort of has been used through time, but he really was a disturbed individual. Like, he really had some issues. He was incredibly violent. From what I've read, like, there numerous police reports throughout the early 1600s. He got, as a lot of people know, he got into a fight and he killed a man and had to flee Rome. I mean, he sort of had so many facets of his life, but that was my introduction to Caravaggio.
Do you know, when you just said, your lecturer had said he dropped an atomic bomb on Rome's art scene, that is nail on the head. It's exactly what he did, because he really shook it up and he caught the attention of people really, really quickly because of his style, because he really kind of came from nowhere. For people that haven't heard of the artist, could you tell us a little bit about Caravaggio and who he was and what he's known for?
Absolutely. He is known as Caravaggio because that is the town that his family was based in, right outside of Lombard, Italy. So his real name is Michelangelo Merisi, and he was born in Milan probably the year 1571. And when he went to Rome, he just adopted Caravaggio as a way to stand out from other artists. And when he arrived in Rome, he was roughly 21, so it was probably 1592. And he had the typical emerging artist backstory. Didn't come from abject poverty, but wasn't royalty. It was sort of right in the middle. But his fame, it wasn't immediate. It took about 8 or 9 years for him to really not only find his style that most people know him for, but it took time to find patrons, secure lodging, food, and he did a lot of works that were just sort of qualified as sort of scene and genre paintings, like really somewhat idealized portraits of youth playing flutes and tuning instruments. There's a famous portrait of Baucis, or I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, where it's like the Roman god of wine and drunkenness, and it's not quite in his deep, dark, chiaroscuro contrast style that most people know him for, but you can see him leading up to it. Like the work from the early 1590s, it's almost like it was done from a completely different person did it from what he's known for.
Yeah, there's a really great example of that actually in the National Gallery in London. So for any of our UK listeners, it's a young boy that's been bit by a lizard. And it's this very typical early Caravaggio style that you're describing, where there's a lot of, it's a half-length portrait. There's a really beautiful detailed face, but also a really intricate and beautifully depicted still life scene. But you wouldn't necessarily peg it as a Caravaggio first off, because he's known for these incredible portraits of Christ and his apostles, and these amazing scenes that are flooded with this divine light. But his earlier, it's so interesting to learn and look at his developing style and him really finding his feet.
Yeah, and you could also see like this upward mobility, because the early stuff is sort of sweet and somewhat wholesome. There's a little bit of implied sexuality, but not too much. But exactly, boy bitten by a lizard, I think you see the intense, beautiful, yet violent ways that he's going to depict everyday life that is also a verse from the Bible. And all these pictures of devotion, like the way that the boy is sort of recoiling his hand and he's wincing in pain, and just the beautiful just economy of strokes. If you look really close at the glass and the lizard, there's not a whole lot there as far as brush strokes, but that's one of the beautiful things about Caravaggio and so many painters that I love. They figured out in just a few quick gestures how to depict something and yet give it life and meaning.
Oh, no, absolutely. Well, let's move on a little bit. So he's found his feet a little bit, and he's essentially he finds patronage with some of Rome's sort of most notable, is it archbishops and things that he receives patronage from?
One of the first was a cardinal known as Cardinal Del Monte, and he was under his protection and patronage for a few years, and that allowed him to get major commissions, the things that he became known for, the things that really put him on the map, like the life of Saint Matthew in the
Oh,
Contarelli Chapel. Like
oh, so amazing.
those are, I mean, if you Google Caravaggio, those are the first few images that come up. They were absolutely magnificent. And when I alluded to the atomic bomb, and you absolutely agree, those were just like art in Rome at that time and throughout history, like was never the same.
Yeah. And even now, sort of looking at it in preparation for this podcast, when I looked across, the life of St. Matthew again, I was kind of like, how was this painted hundreds of years ago?
Exactly.
And this is why I think Caravaggio is just so brilliant, because it doesn't matter how many times you see it, it can still blow or bowl you over, rather. And this painting I haven't actually looked at in years, and I was like, oh my God, okay, I forgot how good this guy is. It's the detail, the every single part of this painting is divine. I think that's the word. It's the only word. I love it. I just, how talented, how crazy that someone can be talented, so talented like that. And I think it's really important to remind people, when you're thinking about, artists in this time, it's not like today where if you're commissioned to make a painting, you just pop to the art shop and you purchase all your paints and whatever. No, like artists had to make their canvases, mix their paints.
Hmm.
It wasn't like, I'm not saying art now is a quick process, but it was very, very labor intensive the entire way through. He had to mix these pigments. It was a skill that he trained for. It's just, oh, it's amazing.
And what I also find so amazing about Caravaggio is that unless a patron specified in the contract that they needed preparatory drawings, he didn't make any. He set up composition in his mind, had the models come into his studio, and then he would make marks on the canvas while the primer was still wet. And then he would go into it. Whereas so many artists, they have charcoal drawings, detailed sketches, and he just sort of like, okay, well, this is how it's going to be. I'm going to figure it out. And he just went. And I've tried to do this in my own painting, and I have no idea how someone can have that kind of memory, observational skill, and just technical know-how. And also keep in mind, he was in his late and early 30s when he was doing this. He died at 39.
Yeah.
So there's a very small window where he was active, and he had maybe 40 paintings that have been identified over the years, and there's a few that are up for debate, but like less than Picasso had thousands of works over his years, whereas someone like Caravaggio, it's a very small window.
Yeah, well, that's it. And even if you compare him to his sort of, contemporaries at the time, Titian and Rembrandt, these people, and they painted well into their late years. And this is why it's so interesting, because he died so young, and he left this, for such a short space of time. Again, going back to what your old literature said, atomic bomb is the only way to
Mm-hmm.
describe what he did to the art world, because he made such an impact. And people would come, people knew who he was, they would try and sort of learn from him, copy his things, and then go off and try and, and put their spin on his style, but he is incredible to have had such an impact, but such a skill. Oh my gosh, like these, yeah. I have to thank you. I must say, Caravaggio has someone, like I said earlier, I haven't really looked at him for a long time. And I always kind of think, what is everyone loves him? Like, what is this? And this has just been a very sort of stark reminder of, yeah, this is why this stuff is incredible. Incredible.
Yeah, I would agree.
So before we spoke about this podcast, you sent me 3 works by the artist, and so let's kind of move on and speak about one of these ones in detail. So which would you like to speak about first? Because you gave me 3 very beautiful examples, which I would agree with you. I had seen the Crucifixion of Saint Peter, but the other 2 were completely new to me.
Yeah, I will start with Saint Peter because of the 3, it was the first one that I saw in the art history class that I mentioned before, and when I was in Rome many, many years ago, and I had time to escape from what I was doing, I immediately went to this church, and this is the first painting I saw since I had it burned into my memory. And I am not afraid to admit, I cried.
Oh, I love that.
It was so magnificent. I cried. Like that whole week I was there, I was able to see just so many Caravaggios in a short span of time. It was just a cry fest the whole week because I was just so moved by these works. The Crucifixion of Saint Peter, as far as size, it is 230 by 178 centimeters. There are 4 people in the painting with Saint Peter as the focus. And the story with Saint Peter goes, as a sign of respect and as not to rival Jesus, he wanted to be crucified upside down. So this is what we're looking at. We're looking at Saint Peter in the process of being crucified. But he's already nailed to the cross. He's not struggling. He doesn't appear to be in pain. He almost looks like he just woke up from a nap. Like he's not quite sure what is going on. So Saint Peter is about halfway down the canvas, and he's at an angle because he's being lifted up by 2 sort of anonymous laborers. And he's not looking at the viewer. He's not looking up at the divine light. He's looking off to the side. And when you're actually in the Cesare Chapel in Rome, his line of sight goes directly to the cross that's on the altar. So Saint Peter is reminding you that I'm dying for a reason, and it is because of the divine love and salvation that exists within Christ. And Caravaggio knew what he was doing. It was probably in the contract that there had to be some sort of reference to the cross in the physical space of the altar. And there's no bloodshed, there's no gore. It's just sort of, it's an understated drama in the way that it probably would have seemed to the people in Peter and Jesus' time. This is just something that happens. Rome is the superpower of its day, and like all superpowers, they have enemies, and the Christians were the enemies, so we have to make examples of these people. It would have been a very common scene for people during that time to just go up on a hill or in the street and see people crucified. And that's what Caravaggio is doing. He's not taking it from not a divine perspective, but the way it's usually depicted is there's a lot of drama and divine light and tension, and he's bringing it down to the street level, which, in addition to the way he painted the works, that was his thing. The people in his paintings were his friends. They were people he drank with. They were probably people that he ran around town with. Some of the people in the paintings appear throughout the course of his career because they were just great models. And it's such a beautiful painting. There's so much tension, there's so much action, because you're seeing Peter being raised. You're looking at this action taking place right in front of you. Like, Peter is the only one whose face is fully illuminated. There's three other men, like I said, but they're just sort of anonymous. They're just day laborers, or they're people that could have been brought in from prison. You know, he's creating, you're a living witness to this man being crucified for his faith. And it's just, like I said, when the teacher put this on the slide projector, that was it for me. And then when I saw it for the first time, again, like, I cried. It's so powerful and beautiful. I might have to get this on a t-shirt or something, just so I can have a reminder.
It's, for me, like, you just hit the nail on the head there, where you said that it's, you know, he brings it down to this street level, because, you know, like you said previously, you know, when we first started talking, you know, in the Renaissance style, of course this is Baroque, in the Renaissance, everything was very idealized. Everyone was very attractive, stylistic, and Peter looks like a scruffy old man. He looks almost homeless and very disheveled.
Yeah.
And you know, the detail, the sort of the wrinkles in his face are incredible. And for me, what really, it's the detail in everything that he does, but particularly in this painting, when you look at Peter's feet, which of course are sort of high up on the canvas because he's been sort of, you know, crucified upside down. It's, you can see how the nail has pierced into the base of his feet.
Yes.
Kind of like if you were to hold a pencil to the palm of your hand and just sort of push it in, how the skin sort of indents around the point. And it when I looked at this earlier, it kind of made me go like, oh God, I could feel it. I could feel it. And it's, I don't ever think a painting's had that effect on me, where I felt the pain of it. I almost kind of had to recoil away from it, because it's so realistic and you can completely relate to it. It's just everything about it. Even like you said, you know, there's three other figures in it. One of them's holding, you know, trying to like heave up Peter with this very sort of thin piece of rope, and you're kind of thinking, is it even going to take the weight? It's so heavy.
Yeah.
You can, I don't know, it's just this real action, and that you can feel every part of it, the weight of Peter, pain, trying to, like, the guy on the ground, you know, using a shovel to sort of help him winch himself up. It's just an amazing painting. So I'll be very honest with you now. So as an art historian, this, I probably shouldn't admit this, I've never been to Rome. Never been. And it's one of these things that it's always been on the list. I've been to Italy, of course, and I went to Florence because I did a module in art history of Italian art, but it was very much based in Florence. So I was really like, oh, so I have to get to Florence. But Rome and Pisa, but no, Rome is still on the list. So that will be, but this is just, yeah, another reason to go and see these incredible things. But I think that's what's brilliant about Italy, is these things are just in the churches. You can just wander in and see incredible art.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I loved when I was there. Not only is there incredible art from icons, but you know, you have a church that has been there since the 13th century, in close proximity to a building that was erected in the 1920s that still has the scars on the facade from World War II. And then there's an ultra modern contemporary condominium across the street. And while they were digging for some sort of sewer line to connect water to this ultra fancy condo, they found a Roman bathhouse from 3,000 years ago. So construction has completely stopped. and now they have to excavate it. And this is all within a 360 view of just turning your head. I mean, it was just incredible.
Well, that's it. And Rome, like you said, it was this hub of activity, but it was quite a dangerous place. I mean, I know Caravaggio has this sort of labeled the art world bad boy, but Rome wasn't an easy place to live. It was very busy, very dangerous.
Yeah.
And I feel that maybe he just kind of fell in with that persona to, I don't know, to stay alive almost. It's but you wouldn't think for someone with such a reputation, he would make such, oh, this painting is incredible.
Yeah, he was making these incredible works and getting all these accolades, and yet his social life was just he was just in shambles. Like he was constantly in trouble. Like I've read accounts that, you know, he was sued for libel because he was going around bad mouthing other painters and calling their work.
Yeah, I had read this.
Yeah, and thankfully the Italians were immaculate documenters because a lot of this has been documented, and you can actually read it. Some of it's available online through the Vatican archives. And you know, he went to jail for throwing rocks at his landlady because she hadn't fixed something in the apartment where he was staying, and then getting
he got
all sorts of nonsense.
Oh, I know. My favorite is he threw that famous one where he cut a waiter by like throwing a plate of artichokes back at him. Like even back then, surely there was more than a plate of artichokes being thrown going on in Rome.
Yeah.
To take that to court. But this is something that people listening, if you don't really know much about Caravaggio, is like we've said, you know, he has this very short life span. But we don't actually really know a horrendous amount about him. And actually, what we do know about him is either through accounts of other people or through these court documents. And it's actually through court documents that we have any sort of idea of who he was, because we have statements that he has given because he's been in a witness stand or, like, you know, giving a testimony in court. And that's how we really kind of know what we know about him. Apart from that, there's a lot of mystery that surrounds him as well.
Yeah, he was one of those people that unfortunately didn't seem to be very sentimental, because he didn't pass a whole lot on, and the relationships that he did have, you know, were tumultuous at best. Even some of his close friends, like you said, testified in court that he was very difficult to deal with. And that sort of adds to the lore, but obviously very complicated man. But could he paint? Oh, could he paint?
Oh, yeah. Let's move away from the Crucifixion of St. Peter. And in the same chapel, there's another work by Caravaggio.
The Conversion of St. Paul. And what's interesting about this painting is it was painted as a set with the previous painting that we discussed. So the head of the Cesare family commissioned them to be painted at the exact same time. What people don't know, and I didn't know until I was actually talking with someone at the church, is that this particular painting and the Crucifixion of St. Peter are the second versions. The original versions were to be painted on cypress panel. And then when Caravaggio was completing the cypress panels, the head of the Cesare family dies.
Oh.
But for whatever reason, there's not much record of what happened to these paintings outside of where they ended up, and why Caravaggio painted two more versions. Some of his contemporary biographers said, well, the patron didn't like it, so he painted the other versions, which we know now. Others say that another buyer came in and just sort of stole them and Caravaggio got a payment on the side. So the original version of the Conversion of St. Paul is still in Rome, but it's in a private collection. evidently there's still Italian royalty, and some sort of
Oh.
prince has this in their private collection. And I've only seen the original version online, and it's like night and day. But this particular conversion of St. Paul, it's very unusual compared to other versions of this same biblical story. So the story is Saul was working for the Roman Empire and was on the way to crucify a great number of Christians. And God appears to him on his horse. He's overcome by this blinding light, falls off his horse, and is converted to Paul and becomes one of the most influential people to spread the New Testament that there was. And Caravaggio's version is very different from all his contemporaries because the event is internalized. So the painting is, there's a soldier on the ground at the bottom of the canvas. He has his arms splayed upward. His eyes are closed. And the way that Caravaggio painted it, Saul's face is sort of at an angle. So it actually, to look and see his expression, you have to turn your head almost to a 45-degree angle. So he's engaging you with the work. And like if Paul's arms were not stretched upward, you would just think this guy's asleep on the ground. And he has this large horse that's sort of standing over Paul, and the horse is moving one of its legs upwards, almost has the expression on his face. It looks down at Paul like, what are you doing? Like, why are you on the ground? Like, the horse is not interested and not involved in this scene at all. Whereas other people painted, the horse is always in a dramatic position. The horse has been overcome by the divine light and the divine energy. It's always in some sort of up on its hind legs, upward charging position. Whereas this is, the horse is just sort of almost bothered. And then there's a guy who's trying to get control of the horse and slowly leading him away. He doesn't really have much of expression on his face. And it's one of those moments, again, where Caravaggio takes this huge theme and brings it down to the street level, where the experience of the divine is something that's internal, that the salvation is something that is on a personal level. But you also have to remember that the Protestant Reformation wasn't that far removed from where we are during this time in Rome. So the Catholic Church is on a very active, conscious PR campaign to resist the notion that you don't need people in pointy hats and the sacrament and all these things that go with the ritual. You need us. There's a reason we're putting these huge monumental paintings in these churches, because, like movie executives say, we got to get the asses in the seats. Like we have to bring people into this world and into this realm. We have to keep the money flowing, because this is not exactly capitalism, but this is a business.
Yeah, because this wasn't very, very long after the Council of Trent, when they met, and this was when they decided what passages, please correct me if I'm wrong here, what passages would go in the Bible and what they can and cannot show in churches, what was considered the correct things to depict, should they have statues, should they have paintings. And like you said, it was, these are important things, they should be in these places of worship because they help people engage and envision. Who better than Caravaggio, really, to bring these things to life.
And a majority of people could not read. So when you go into church for Mass, yes, you can hear the words coming out of the priest or whoever is presiding over uh, this ceremony or talking to you about scriptures. But when you see a story, essentially you're watching a music video or a YouTube video or a TV commercial for its day advertising the conversion of St. Paul. You're looking at something that is reinforcing the story of the crucifixion of St. Peter as someone is listening to it. And it's just reinforcing the scriptures and, like I said, the PR campaign that the Catholic Church had going at this time.
God, I can't even imagine. It must have been mind-boggling to like have something. If we find it powerful now, and we have, iPhones and all these amazing things in the world, what must have been like when essentially your whole life evolved around the church, and then something like this is unveiled? It must have just, well, blown everyone's mind, as it continues to do, and be so powerful. What I think is really interesting about this is the horses. I mean, it's a huge painting and depiction, and it's in this because I've not seen it physically, but I've seen photos of where it is in this church, and it's encased in this, surrounded by this very sort of heavily, oh my goodness, sort of coruscant and decorative sort of paneling, and then they have this, that the horse is huge. The horse is absolutely huge. And what I love is that the star of the show is on the ground. He's not in this position of power. He's very vulnerable.
Yeah, it's almost like he's just some guy. He's just some guy that was doing his duty for the Roman Empire, and God chose him, and he looks like an ordinary, sort of sturdy soldier. And what I like about this painting, when I think about the way that the conversion of St. Paul has been portrayed in other versions, is that the horse doesn't look like it has just thrown Saul off of it. It just looks like Saul was on the horse and God came in, talked to him. He was so overwhelmed, he just fell off. And again, it reinforces, at least to me, that the spiritual is also, and can be, and should be, in my opinion, personal.
Gosh, that's really powerful. Yeah, absolutely. And it can happen to everyone. It'd be as normal as they come, and you can still have a personal experience, powerful experience of faith happen to you. Oh, everyone that's listening to this, please do go and have a look at these works. So, as always, they're available to view on my Instagram page and on my website as well. And there's some really incredible material and videos out there as well, which I'll link in the show notes below for anyone that wants to sort of dive a little deeper into these works and whereabouts they are in Rome. But these are just so brilliant. And I think you picked 3 very interesting works because they're not, like you say, when you Google Caravaggio, they're not the first 5 or 6 that come up. There are other things that he's better known for. And yet these completely deserve, their time in the spotlight, so to say. And speaking of light, of course, Caravaggio is known as, the master of light. And here again, it's just this incredible contrast between light and dark. And even like for me, looking at it now, the sort of the underbelly of the horse on his like 4th back leg, which is, there's just a suggestion of it in the darkness, is amazing.
Yeah, and
still,
just the again, to think that he just sort of, okay, bring this horse in, okay, you Steve, whatever your name is, put this armor on, lay on the ground, and just hold your arms up like this. And Carl, go behind the horse and just sort of just hold it. Okay, all right, everybody ready? All right, I'm just gonna go in, will break in about 5 minutes or so, and then 8 months later, I'll knock out this magnificent painting.
Oh,
And also, to go back on the details, there's the horse's leg, and right up front to the right of Saul's head, almost at the edge, is his helmet that's turned toward
yes.
the
Oh,
viewer. And like, for anybody that's listening that paints, that wants to geek out, if you're able to see this in person, whether you're in Rome or you have the ability to travel, get as close as you can to this painting and just look at the economy of strokes on the helmet. It's just incredible the way the light is hitting the brim that goes right above the eyes, the way it curves, and it's just. I'm just going to make a sound effect right now. It's like you just take a little bit of paint and you just dot it across the top of the canvas, and you know where to blend it and you know where not to blend it. It's just incredible. And then the sword over to the left side, the blade that recedes into the background, and the little highlights that are on the handle and the scabbard, and the little tiny shadow that goes across the cloth and then goes down into the fold is it's just incredible. Again, this was
oh,
painted
it's just good.
420 years ago.
Oh, it's just mind blowing. It's mind blowing. And like we've been talking about this painting, I think, for a good 20 minutes, and we're still picking at
Yeah,
details and still kind of like melting into them. Like, oh, they're just so good. But it's just amazing. And to go back on what you said there about, if you can see this in real life and you'll see, you know, every individual brushstroke, it's so important if you can go and see these things that please do, because as brilliant as it is to have all these amazing things available online where you've got like high zoom quality and things and all these videos and whatever else, there's something that is lost in a painting and sculpture as well when a photo's taken of it, and it's never quite the same. Like the energy, if
oh
that makes
yeah,
sense, is never quite captured of the brush strokes, because you can feel how an art, like the noise you made, that sort of great sound, you can feel that when you're with something. And the first time I experienced that actually was with a Van Gogh painting, and there was an exhibition that came to Scotland. Oh my goodness, 2011. So I was just finishing university, and I I completely was. I could feel like the energy and the sort of
mm,
heat and the need and the power to sort of get the paint on the canvas as quickly as possible. And I sort of, when I got to the gift shop, I was like, I have to buy the book. I have to buy the book. And when I picked up the catalogue, it was just so flat in comparison to what I had seen. And it was like a punch in the gut. I was just like, oh, what's happened? And that was like my first-hand experience of you just have to see the energy. And oh, when the world is fixed, Jeff, I promise you, I'm going to go to Rome, and you will get a text
yes.
message from me being like, "Few
Yeah,
guesses where I am."
I would expect
I'm
nothing.
I'm
Yes,
also
please. Just
crying.
you can just you take a picture of the painting and just crying emojis, and that will just
Oh,
make my day. And I remember having the same feeling. Like, for example, this is a little bit more recent, but Kerry James Marshall had his retrospective, and it came to the Los Angeles MoCA, and I live about, if depending on how fast you're driving, 4 to 6 hours north of there. So I went down to see the exhibit, and I had the catalog, and I remember seeing videos of the work, and then I see it in person, and it's the size of a wall. And you see the textures, you see the details. Like you said, you see the heat of this work, and you see the smiles in the faces of the people, and you see the texture, and I mean, there's no substitute for seeing and experiencing work in person. And I know that there's a lot of artists that work in new media, and works that can only live and function online or on a phone.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe I'm just too old to really to get it or understand it, but it's just not the same. It doesn't grip me and hold me the same. It's like experiencing a really good piece of music in your house and then going to see that band play live.
It's always better to experience it and see these things. And oh, yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, to save this podcast being about 7.5 hours long, let's move, because I think you and I could like wax lyrical about, so, you know, it's so funny. When you sent me 3, I was like, okay, 3 images. I think that's a good sort of like 30 minutes chat there. That'll be great. And this is what I love about this podcast, because whenever we have a conversation with, it just gets so carried away talking about art. And I just love, like, Jeff, the passion and your love for these paintings is infectious. And I could honestly listen to you talk about this artist till the cows come home. So we're going to move on to the last one now. So what can you tell us about the Madonna of the Pilgrims, which was painted a little bit later than the 2 that we have spoken about? So the previous 2 that we spoke about, they were painted around 1601. And this was a little later, not very much later, but about 1604, 1606.
Yeah, so Caravaggio was not quite at the peak of his fame, but he was known at this point. Like the previous paintings that we talked about, and then the life of Saint Matthew, like really put him on the map. I mean, he could not paint fast enough. He had waiting lists. And Madonna of the Pilgrims, also known as Madonna of Loreto, is great because it's only a few minute walk from the picture of Saint Peter and Saint Paul. So you can just, I mean, it was a great week. I just walked to see all these Caravaggios. But this is one of my favorites and one of his best, yet not as well known works as the others. It's like Caravaggio people really love and know about this painting, but the general public may not. And I don't know why, because it's just a magnificent painting. But it's a really simple composition. There's 2 older people down toward the bottom that are kneeling to a woman in a doorway who is the Madonna of Loreto. And she's holding the baby Jesus, who, again, in Caravaggio's wheelhouse, he depicts the divine as the ordinary. If you didn't see the halos around baby Jesus's head and the woman, you would just think it's a woman holding a chubby child. Because if we believe that Jesus was a man that walked the earth, then he at one point was a child. And the details on this painting are just sort of incredible. So you have the typical one light source, dark background. A lot of things are in shadow, a lot of things are implied. But on this one, it's the feet, the dirty, gross feet of the pilgrims. These people have walked to see this woman. They have traveled a long way. It's probably reminiscent of the 1600 Catholic papal jubilee that happened in Rome at that time, where 1 million plus faithful visited Rome from all over Europe and as far away as North Africa, some even from the Middle East. And unless you have a lot of money, you're walking. So these people, they traveled a long way, and you can see it in their face. The old woman that's to the right, it's almost in shadow. She's old. She's wrinkled. It looks maybe the way Caravaggio has painted her cheeks and her jaw, that maybe she's missing some teeth. The man to the left of her His clothes are shabby. He's walking with a stick. Like I said, his feet, like no one could paint dirty feet like Caravaggio. And then the way that the building is painted, it's a doorway of any Roman abode that you could walk to or see in an alley. There's a little bit of exposed brick to the right of the entrance.
Yeah.
And the woman in the doorway, like for Caravaggio nerds, is a woman named Lena, who was a friend that he used in several paintings throughout his lifetime. And it's just magnificent. And I got teary-eyed when I saw it, because it's just so beautiful. And it's taking the religious experience and putting it into human terms. This is a living woman. This is a living child. They're exalted and they're divine, but at the same time, they're approachable. This is someone that you could walk up to and say hello. This is someone who you could come to their door and kneel in front of them and they wouldn't be weirded out. Like, we probably have all seen sort of documentaries, maybe not documentaries, but movies where Jesus is depicted as a guy that's in the village with his crew around him that people could just walk up to and experience. He's not floating on a cloud. He is humble. He is meek. He is a man of the people. And this is one of the things that I fell in love with when I learned about Caravaggio. And I think this is why he still resonates, because he, like, no matter what is going on in the world, you can look at the people in these paintings and perhaps they look like people you know, or you can relate to the people in these paintings because they're experiencing something that you could experience as well, because there's not all this ostentation involved in it.
Well, that's it. And what I love when you sent me this, and when I looked at it for the first time, I was like, oh, there's nothing really, there's not a lot really going on here. And I think that's the point. The pilgrims that have walked to kneel at the feet of the Madonna, they are at the height that people viewing this could kneel down also with them, echoing, they are you are these people. She is not this thing to be feared and be intimidated by. She's graceful and she's welcoming and, just like you said, just normal. And in this very non-grand setting, as you said, there's exposed bricks, there's a crack on the wall. It's not this highly decorated place. It's a very normal setting. And Caravaggio does this beautiful thing, and he does this in the Matthew painting that we were talking about earlier. He just has a lick of gold as like a suggestion of a halo, and you know exactly what it is, but you don't. Perhaps with Madonna you do see it, but not with the baby Jesus. It's almost kind of lost in his hair, and there's beautiful flick, and it's just one brush stroke, and that's the only thing that lets you know there's something a little bit special here. I think it's a brilliant painting. Oh, the Madonna's skin as well, it's like porcelain. It's just gorgeous. It's gorgeous and so humble. But when it was unveiled, I read people didn't really know how to take it. There was a bit of an outcry.
Yeah, that is true. A lot of his contemporaries were very off-put by, in particular, the shabby clothes of the peasants and the dirt and their bare feet. A lot of people thought it was disrespectful, that it was it wasn't fitting for something as monumental and divine as paying tribute to this woman, that it should be more grand. that it should be more disrespectful. I mean, not disrespectful. It should be more respectful. But it was much copied after his life.
Oh, really?
It was a very popular painting, and it was very popular during the time, from what I've been able to read, that many people in Rome came to see it. They lined up to see it because, again, oh, this is me. It's like I am this man, like, or it may be literally, hey, this is me in the painting. Like, I was like, I'm Carlo. See the beard, this is, and that's my mom. That's my mom, Phyllis, or whatever her name is. Like, this is me, And he's, oh, that baby, that's my nephew. Or,
oh, I love that. I just love it. I just think he has this really powerful way of humanizing something which until this point, was meant to sort of, put fear into people and make you sort of behave in a certain way because you were not worthy of appearing next to these people or even being considered to, I don't know, to be depicted or rightfully be depicted on the walls of a very sacred, important building in Rome that you go to pray every week. And then Caravaggio comes along and he really, as you've continuously said throughout this conversation, humanizes it and takes away that layer of untouchability, unrelatability. This is religion for the people, relatable, accessible.
Yeah, accessible and religion for the people I think is a perfect way to describe what he did.
I mean, everything in this, like the old women in particular, again, I just love that he depicts older members of the society as well. And he really doesn't hold back. There's none of this sort of glossing over wrinkles and tiredness and a life where they've had to work and it's been hard. And I love that. I just love it. I can't really think other than, in religious scenes, I can't really think of other examples where it's been this real, but also this beautiful. There's always this, as you said previously, the very sort of glossy, everyone looking really great, just atomic bomb after atomic bomb, really.
And
for Caravaggio. And this is also painted just before he was embroiled in the murder that he then had to very famously flee Rome for, which and then his style really changed as well after this as well. But you can because he obviously had to sort of jump around for a number of years while he was waiting for a pardon. But I think that also shows you how important he was that the Pope pardoned him for
for
a murder.
Talk about political pull. That like you were so consequential that you can kill a guy, and the Pope would like, all right, well.
Friends in high places doesn't really get much higher than God's representative on earth.
But then unfortunately it wasn't enough to save him, because if you want to believe that he died of malaria or whatever the story that was written by one of his biographers that wasn't a fan of his during his lifetime. He supposedly died mad on a beach from fever caused by malaria because his paintings were being shipped off and he wasn't on board. But most likely he was probably murdered, but prior to hearing about his pardon, he had, in addition to having friends in high places, he also had enemies in high places. And it's not quite known why, but the Knights of Malta, which somehow he was able to work his way into and become an actual knight without having to go through the regular channels or being from royal blood. He did something, possibly maybe had an affair with someone that he shouldn't have had an affair with, or offended someone that he shouldn't have had an affair with. But whatever the offense was, most likely he was murdered for it. And it's rather unfortunate. But considering all the things that he did in his life, having all these chances, and despite being this beautiful, brilliant man, he was just so, I don't know what even the right word is for it. He was so angry and so broken, and he just could not get it together. And he had all these chances and all these opportunities, and he just kept running afoul of the people that wanted to help him and give him these opportunities. And so many opportunities that he just sort of fumbled, and it caught up to him.
Yeah. I mean, as the Caravaggio expert here, where do you stand on the theory that, so a few episodes ago, I did conspiracy theories in the art world, and my conspiracy theory was that, well, it wasn't really a conspiracy theory. It was talking about sort of controversies and sort of arguments in the art world, as well as conspiracy theories. And one of the sort of controversies that I spoke about was that obviously Caravaggio killed someone, and it was supposed to be over a bet or a tennis match. And this is the thing about, biographers, they're all sort of very conflicting, and everyone has their own ideas. But there's the suggestion that, as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, they had to physically make their own paint and things like that. And at the time, lead was a very important component in paints. And what researchers seem to think nowadays is that why he was so angry and deranged is that he suffered from severe lead poisoning. What's your take on that?
I would probably believe that. Yeah, if you're making your own paint for 20, 30 years and you have no idea what the effects of lead are, that they made their paint. There's no warning label if you go to the store and buy a tube of Old Holland that it actually has lead in it. There's no skull and crossbones on it. That makes perfect sense that he would suffer from lead poisoning. Yeah,
for me as well. I think it really hits home that, because you're totally right. They were in there. And I'm fairly certain he would have, tried to experiment to make, if I add a wee bit more of this and a little bit less of that, what does this do? He's not exactly going to be wearing gloves or a mask and things that we have available here. He would have just been like, hi, oh, brilliant, Andy, you've brought the horse, great. While you're putting that kit on, I'm just going to, mix this paint up, bring the lead in, lads, sort of thing. And it completely makes sense to me. And I think it's a really, really, I don't know, interesting find and theory behind someone who, I don't know, because maybe he did die of a fever. I mean, I kind of stand with you. I do think he ruffled a lot of feathers and annoyed a lot of very important people, because the person he killed was a very big player in Rome, and he had a whole family out looking for him for the rest of his life. So I would stand with you in that he was murdered. But there's also that, if you think he did suffer from lead poisoning, what effects did that have on his immune system? Or did it become so severe that eventually everything started to shut down? And what was the level of exposure? But what's really, really annoying is we'll never know, because did they not know where he's buried? Is this correct? Is this something, or his body's been stolen? Something? Is this somebody else?
I have read things on Scientific America or National Geographic that claims that they found the remains of Caravaggio. But my question is, okay, what are you comparing it to? What are you comparing against? Like, did someone take one of his bones and carve his initials in it? Like, how are you going to identify that this is actually Caravaggio?
Maybe they've scanned it there's been so much lead in the bones that maybe they're like, hey, this has got to
Yeah,
this has got to be the
but then
guy.
if that's the case, then
Um,
all the contemporary skeletons from that time that were artists would have high amounts of lead. Really anyone from that period of time, because pipes were all either made with lead or lined with lead. Lead was silverware, cups. It was all over. No one
yeah,
had any idea of what this did. And a lot of people have theorized that that was one of the reasons why the Roman Empire ended abruptly, because everyone just went bananas from lead poisoning, because it was used in sort of every aspect and every tier of Roman
yeah.
life.
It's so interesting. See people that think art history is boring though. Like I just think it's filled with scandal, murder, affairs, crazy people. Oh, and I think Caravaggio is a brilliant poster boy for that, really, because not only was he insanely talented, he was quite potentially bonkers. So, oh, Jeff, I have
Oh, me too.
loved talking to you. Honestly, I have been captivated listening to you talking about these
Oh,
paintings.
my
Thank you
pleasure.
so, so much for coming on and talking so brilliantly about this amazing artist. Before you go, I do have one final question,
Uh-oh.
and it's quite a big question. And I try and remember to ask my guests. I'm about 50-50 with this at the moment of remembering and then forgetting because I just get so excited at the conversation. But you can take this as sort of wide or as personal to you. But my final question is, why is art important?
Wow. It's Why are you ending with such a softball, easy question? I don't understand.
I know. I think maybe I should start with it, and then
Oh man.
it's a horrible question. I know. Someone actually asked me this back about 3 weeks ago, and I was like, "How
Yeah,
dare
it's
you?"
well, I don't I cannot conceive of life being bearable without it. I don't
Mm,
not only don't, but I can't imagine human beings making it this far without art in its various forms, the way that it has appeared in every single culture in countless ways. We would not have made it this far. And I can think of, this is going to go totally left, but there's a comedian that I like who was active in the 90s that unfortunately isn't alive, who's named Bill Hicks. And he has this routine that
mm,
he says that if you like try to imagine your life without books and music and novels, and try to think about, I mean, the routine is much more graphic than I'm going to go into it, but he
yeah,
said try to imagine all the things that you enjoy about your life not being there because the musicians and the authors and the artists didn't do it. And where would you be? What would the quality of your life be? What would the quality of your relationships be? And if we think about the world and about history, and specifically for this podcast, art history, what do we remember about civilizations? Yes, we remember their military campaigns and the territories that a civilization may or may not have covered. But like, what are the hallmarks? The hallmarks are their art. The hallmarks are the ways that they express themselves, the way that they interacted with the world, the way that they push thought in a new direction with creativity, sculpture, painting, performance, ritualistic objects, entire languages that didn't have a equivalent anywhere else in the world. They were completely unique to that culture, and they were only decipherable because they were pictograms that only could have developed in that part of the world. You know, that's what human existence is. It is the creations that we make. And without art, I don't think we would be here.
Jeff, that is an amazing response. And oh my gosh, I'm actually a bit speechless. I can't believe you've just done that off the cuff. How can you speak so well?
I often wonder that myself.
So for everyone listening, this will be the last podcast before I hand over fully to Jeff. He's going to take it. He's going to take it from here. Oh, I love that. It's so true though. It's so true. Thank you. What a brilliant way to end. Jeff, where can people connect with you and find out what you're up to?
Like everyone else, I'm on Instagram. It's easily searchable. I think my exact handle is at Jeff.Musser, Musser.art. I also have a website that is just my name, jeffmusser.com. On Twitter sometimes, but not really. Those are the best two ways to find out what I'm doing, say hello, any way you want to communicate. Those are the best two channels.
Amazing. And I will link all your channels and your website in the show notes below, as well as links to all the images and some other reading materials that I've come across and sort of prep for this podcast. Jeff, once again, thank you so much. I am still completely mind blown by your final response to that really easy question that I asked you. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much. And there you have it, the end of another episode of the Jo's Art History podcast. Once again, thank you so much to Jeff for coming on and speaking so brilliantly about Caravaggio and these three incredible works. I'm still in complete awe/envy of how fabulously Jeff spoke, and I hope you guys enjoyed the episode as much as I did, and I learned so much about this brilliant artist. And I would just once again encourage you to go away and have a look at these paintings if you do not know what they look like, or even if you'd never heard of Caravaggio before, go and have a little look. His stuff is incredible. And he is the art world bad boy, or the original art world bad boy. So that's always good fun as well to discover. So do go away, have a look and enjoy. As always, any of the images that we discussed today can be viewed via my Instagram highlights reel. So if you go on to my Instagram page at Jo's Art History, if you go to my highlights reel and look along for episode 31, so it'll be a little microphone with the number 31, that is where you can find the images. Or if not, you can find them online via YouTube. I also make this episode into a video, so you can find this on my YouTube channel, Jo's Art History. If you'd like to get in touch and discuss anything that you've heard today, please feel free to do so. You can email me, joesarthistory@gmail.com, or you can contact me via my DMs on Instagram, and once again that is at Jo's Art History. DMs are always opened, and it's always lovely to hear from you. If you've enjoyed the episode, if any suggestions for future episodes you'd like to hear, I'd love to hear from you, and please do get in touch. Also, if you've enjoyed listening to Jeff, please do write him and say so. It's always brilliant when people take the time out of their day to message my guests and say, oh, I really enjoyed that. So I would encourage you, if you're not going to leave a review or get in touch with me, just ping Jeff a wee message and give him a wee follow on his Instagram handle. All those links are in the show notes below. Finally, I've been Jo McLaughlin, your host and your resident art historian, and I really hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Jo's Art History podcast, and I look forward to welcoming you next week for another episode. Until then, keep learning, and remember, art is for all. Bye.